I am an artist living in beautiful Vermont, USA, and I have a lot of questions. So I engage the minds of the people that I meet. Poets, writers, artists. I explore what's inside and share it with you. My name is Ricky McGeckran, and I am eager to know. I'm here with Putnam Smith, who is a singer, songwriter, and homesteader located right here in southeastern Vermont. Putnam, thank you so much for being on Eager to Know.
Thank you, Rick. It's great to be here.
Now, Sunday night, I was at your house. I got invited to a event, I guess it was. You had a friend of yours who was a musician who was performing, and it was a very intimate situation. There was probably like 20 people in your incredible home. He was performing music, you were performing music. A lot of it was music that you all had written, and it was an incredible experience. And I guess that's something that you used to do quite regularly.
Yeah. The house concerts is in the kind of folk music world, is how we usually refer to it. And it's become quite a phenomenon, I would say, in the folk music world. And I've even heard of it being done in the classical music world a little bit as well. But for anyone out there who has not experienced a house concert, well, I don't know. Do you want to give your impressions first, or do you want me to speak to?
I want you to give your idea what you want to say about it, and then I definitely had an impression that I would like to share, but I want to hear yours.
Yeah. Well, as a traveling musician, I definitely played in public venues, kind of more traditional spaces, and those are wonderful things to do as a traveling musician. But my bread and butter on touring, and I toured all over the country, was really these house concerts, which often they would come about from either a fan or a friend or even a family member who wanted to open up their home to invite their friends and family to a concert. Usually in a living room. There's no PA system. Usually there's like either some snacks or even a potluck, which is what we had. So it's a real social event, and there's usually a suggested donation of anywhere between $10-$20. It really varies. And all of that goes to the artists, which is unlike a public venue where they'd often take like 50% of the door,
How many people would usually be at one of these house concerts?
They range from, I'd say the average is probably about 30 people. I have played house concerts with as many as like 50 plus, which has to be a pretty big living room or space. But I've even played them, like I played ones in the, remember one in Denver, Colorado, in someone's apartment, and there were like 15 people. And, at a public venue, if you had 15 people at a show, it would feel really lousy, experientially.
Right.
Whereas if you're in someone's living room and there's no PA system, it has a totally different vibe. And I think that's one of the things I love about playing house concerts and now hosting them, is that it's really a human experience. You kind of strip away the technological barriers of like a PA system and the electric light switch,
online tickets, marketing, promotion, all of that stuff. Well, as an attendee, I would just say I was very close. I was like up front, so I was very close to when you were performing, you and your wife were performing, and when Connor was performing. And the sense that I was feeling, I felt like I was experiencing something so real. Like so much of our world is not phony, but it's fabricated and it's secondhand, or you're seeing a copy. But I was experiencing Connor, hearing his voice, hearing his guitar directly. It wasn't recorded. And also, it was songs that he had written and created. So it was this I was almost moved to tears just being that close to someone creating something new in the universe, and I'm actually experiencing it so close. I did not expect that.
Yeah, and I think it lends itself to, you know, sharing the story behind, the song that someone wrote, or little anecdotes, and there's often engagement with the audience that you wouldn't get in the same way, I think, in most public venues.
Good. Let's talk about how you got into music. I know that you started writing songs at 7. I assume you started first on piano.
Yeah.
Can you just briefly tell me about how that all started? Did you grow up in a musical home?
Yeah, to some extent I did. My mom plays a little guitar and piano. My dad's a singer, and definitely a love of music in the household for sure. And so I definitely grew up around it, and I was just drawn to music from really the beginning. I started kind of messing around on piano and writing little songs, music and lyrics, and then picked up guitar age 12, and then banjo and mandolin in college. And so that was...
What did you study in college?
I studied philosophy.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you make a great songwriter.
Well, yeah, maybe. I don't know if that directly corresponds, but I definitely, I've always been one who thinks about things, and I'm curious about things, and so that definitely relates, I would say.
Let's talk about banjo. I know about your arm there.
Thank you.
I know that you were playing that the other night, and I'm not that familiar with banjo. Obviously, I'm familiar with how it sounds.
Yeah.
What is it about? How is it different from a guitar? I know it obviously looks different. There's a 4-string banjo. There's a 6-string.
Or 5-string, mostly, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Is it just a completely different acoustical model of how it generates sound?
Yeah. Well, they're kind of different. They're associated mostly with different genres of music.
Okay.
I mean, banjo originally came from Africa.
Okay.
And, then kind of went through a lot of changes when it came to the States. And the 4-string banjo is often associated with like Dixieland jazz, New Orleans style stuff, and 5-string banjo usually either goes into bluegrass or old time. And so
and
yeah,
you had a 5-string.
Yeah, I'm a 5-string player,
and there's no hole like in a in a guitar.
Yeah, it's just a skin, either synthetic or actual calf skin that's stretched over the rim, so it's really like a drum technically, with strings on it, and gives a very different sound. Yeah.
Interesting. And a mandolin is like a mini guitar?
Yeah, although tuned like a fiddle. Yeah, or a violin.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and I think as a songwriter, I was drawn to different instruments largely because like it just, you get into certain habits as an artist, as as an artist,
Sure.
you get into habits, and the best way for me to kind of get outside of those or break those habits was just to switch instruments. So like, I'd develop a certain style on piano, and then I'd get into habits and I'd get bored with it. And so then I took up guitar and I started writing totally different kinds of songs, and then picked up banjo, and yet that was another kind of realm. So.
Now, you said that you started writing songs at 7.
Yeah.
So the song creation, the music creation, that was early on. So it wasn't just like taking piano lessons and learning Bach and Beethoven.
Right.
You were creating, was it associated with melody and lyrics? Tell me about where that came from. Is that like kids writing stories?
I think not as much for me. I think I developed more of a storytelling style later in my life, but as a kid, I don't know, I wrote about it was often emotional processing for me, or whatever I was thinking about or feeling. Great way to kind of, process what you're experiencing in life, right? And yeah, in terms of music and lyrics, often people ask like, well, which comes first, the music or lyrics? And usually I would say the music comes first, although in reality, it's almost a simultaneous process for me. Like, usually I'll stumble upon something that sounds cool or intrigues me musically, and then the things that I have been thinking about in the back of my mind or experiencing or feeling, like usually like a line or just first 2 lines of a song will pop out of almost seemingly nowhere, and then it's just a process of kind of following that thread. Like, where does it go? Where does this song go from there?
Is it a fluid, this feels great process, or is it like work?
It depends on the song, probably, but mostly it feels like a cathartic, process where, in the process of writing it, I work through something myself or craft. Sometimes it takes more of the shape of like crafting something that when I'm done with it, I'm like, oh yeah, I need to tweak that a little bit more here and there, and tink tink tonk tonk a little bit, and then you come up with something that like, okay, I think that's ready to share with people.
Now, are you writing about how you're feeling, or are you writing about how you see the things about the world, or all sorts of things?
I'd say all the above.
All the above.
Although, I definitely think that I'm in my best zone almost when I am connecting what my experiences are with other people's experiences. Like, often I've kind of told the stories of people I've met, or anecdotes from people's lives. Of course, that gets interesting when you're playing a show and they show up to the gig.
Yeah.
And they recognize in the middle of the song, like, wait a minute, this is about me. But you almost actually, that has always worked out for the best for me. Maybe it's because I'm not writing like trashing somebody's life or something. Usually celebrating.
You're not writing "You're So Vain" by Carly Simon.
No. Although there's a song from my first album back in 2007 that was this guy. I was working carpentry at the time, and working with this guy who just had a really fascinating life, and struggled with alcohol and was an ex-Marine and had all these amazing stories. And that was one where I wasn't sure how he was going to respond when he heard the song, because it was not entirely rosy, and yet he responded so positively. He showed up after the gig, and he's like, I've sold 2 of your CDs and I'm going to need more. I think he was just really honored that someone tried to tell his story.
Right.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Now, another thing that you're involved in is homesteading. Can you tell me and listeners a little bit about that?
Yeah. Well, and I'd probably that can mean a lot of things. Okay. I would also often maybe say that I'm an aspiring homesteader.
Okay.
But I think traditionally that's often meant like 100% living off the land and growing your own food and getting your own fuel, and I'm definitely aspiring towards that.
Okay.
Because Helen and Scott Nearing, who started out here in Vermont and then moved to Maine, were big inspirations for me. But when I was touring, and I've stopped touring now only because I had 2 small kids, but back when I was touring, I kind of developed a life pattern of kind of homesteading in the summer and growing having big gardens, canning a lot of my own food, freezing, dehydrating, that kind of thing. And then once I'd kind of planted my garlic for the following year, sometime in October, that's when my touring season really began in earnest. I'd still play some local shows during the summer, but that they tended to kind of balance each other out, because one of the goals of homesteading is to be closer to the land, but it's also just to cut down your own expenses and
consuming stuff,
consuming less, having to buy fewer things and all of that. So, and as you know, it's really hard to make a living as an artist, any kind of artist, but folk singers, the joke is like, there's tens of dollars to be made in folk music, and sadly that's very often the case. But when I was with the homesteading piece, it kind of took some of the pressure off the touring. So like, I felt like I could get by on a lot less money than someone who was living in a fancy house with and buying all their food and paying oil prices and whatnot for fuel.
So an interest in homesteading and playing the mandolin and the banjo. So you must have grown up in rural Tennessee or something. Is that correct?
No, I grew up in a suburb outside of Boston.
And obviously I'm joking, because I know exactly where you grew up, because you grew up in the town where my best friend lives. So I'm in your hometown, which is the first suburb right outside of Boston.
Yeah.
It's none of those things. So how did someone who grew up there end up with all of those things that activate you and interest you. Do you know why?
Yeah, well, I mean, my dad was definitely an influence. I mean, we were not in like a cookie cutter suburban house. We were in kind of an older house on an acre of land, which was maybe kind of unusual in the town of Milton. But my dad was definitely kind of a misfit in the neighborhood for having organic gardens and composting way back before that was a thing, and cutting and splitting his own wood to heat the house with the wood stove. So I was kind of embarrassed by him as a kid because I was like, Dad, you're so old-fashioned.
And however,
but of course, the apple does not fall far from the tree. So I discovered a love of those things myself in my 20s, really, and been kind of trying to incorporate that into my life now, for sure.
How would you say that this interest and passion for homesteading relates to your passion for writing, being a songwriter, and a musician?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that Thoreau said he wanted to have wide margins to his life, and I love that metaphor of just like that little space and edges on the edge of your page of your life, right? To maybe scrawl your own notes, that kind of thing. And for me, being in kind of having the homesteading piece of my life where I'm out working in the garden, weeding, splitting wood, stacking wood, those kinds of things, they kind of let my mind relax a little bit, and a lot of the things I've been thinking about or experiencing kind of get to percolate back in the deep recesses of my brain. So I think that there's I don't know exactly how it works, but what I know is that they kind of tend to feed each other. That I'll often have like a little song in the back of my mind that I've never been one. There are songwriters who like put on a suit and tie and like go to the office and start working. There are songwriters like that. I'm not one. I usually have different ideas in the back of my mind, and I just need those wide margins to my life to kind of think about it and let lyrical ideas kind of emerge. And then the other thing about the kind of homesteading model where I'm kind of my own boss, with chunks of time to work out in the garden or whatever, is there have been literally times when I will put down my shovel and go inside and pick up a guitar and start writing a song, because sometimes the ideas just come, and having the freedom to put down what I'm doing and go work on a song is invaluable for me. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. So that's a great answer, and it reminds me of a couple things. First of all, I haven't been as good about it lately, but meditation, specifically
sure.
Transcendental meditation,
Yeah.
which is really about just kind of detaching from everything.
Yeah.
And that is very valuable for many ways. And similar to what you're describing, chopping wood, that's sort of almost like a meditation.
Yeah, or weeding.
Yeah, where you're not consuming somebody else's creative output,
right.
Which so much of what we do, I feel, is other people's, whether it's, Facebook, Instagram, even reading a novel, watching TV, watching a movie. It's other people's creativity, which isn't, sometimes that's inspiring, but oftentimes it's not, at least for me, it's not always the best way to inspire me.
Rick, that makes me even realize also when you said the word inspire, like I would say that even just being out in nature, and a lot of my songs are on themes of either homesteading or being close to the land. One of my albums is called We Could Be Beekeepers, and I think that kind of being in touch with that kind of work and that kind of way of living inspires something for me musically. So even just the fact that a lot of my songs are about my experiences as a homesteader, I would say.
Nice.
Or aspiring homesteader.
The other thing this brought to mind was the idea of space. I used to be not a creative person. I had like a regular corporate job, and I was a developer and a project manager. So it's all about like plans and rigor and making sure every hour, every minute is being used for something efficient. And what I realize, and now that I'm a creative individual, is that does not serve me. I actually have to have space where it is open and I am not doing things because that's how I sort of get recharged. That's not really the word, and not even inspired, but it's sort of like it starts to get refilled. If I am back to back to back doing things all the time, I'm not going to get the best results creatively. So when you talk about weeding and chopping wood, I can see how that would happen. The other thing that I'm really starting to realize is that I feel like our brains are more art than science. And I think that just being, I drive down Putney Valley Road, I think Pleasant Valley Road in near my house, and I see all of these cows that are on the side of the road in someone's farm, and they're just chilling out and just looking and just being cows. And I kind of think of there's part of us that needs that. Putnam, thank you so much for, well, first of all, having me to your home this week to see you perform and to see Connor perform, but also for coming here to be a guest on Eager to Know. This was fantastic.
Thank you so much, Rick. It's been a pleasure talking with you.
My name is Ricky McGuckran, and you have been listening to Eager to Know, the podcast. If you haven't already, please go to Apple Podcasts and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. Join me next week for another Eager to Know podcast.